So a very warm welcome to this short security session. So over the next 25 minutes or so, I'd like to present an introduction to the insider threat in aviation. So this might be something that you know a little bit about already. It might be a new topic to you if you're interested in security. It's just going to give you kind of a jumping off point really to the insider threat, from which you can then go and do a little bit of research and look up some of the examples. And I've got a couple of pointers for you as we go through. So in this presentation, what I'm going to be talking to you about is I'm going to introduce what is an insider. So we'll have a look at what that actually is, who they are and what their motivations are. And we're going to have a look at really if we should be worried about this insider threat, if it is something that we should be having on our radar. I'm going to talk you through some examples of insider activity within the aviation industry. And then really, lastly, and most importantly, what we can do about it. Now, all the content that I'm going to present to you is in the public domain. So none of the content that I'm going to talk about today is classed as official, sensitive, or secret, but especially considering the subject, you should always be mindful of your conversations around security. And like I say, you may wish to follow up with further research on the themes or the case studies that I mentioned today. So first off then, let's just have a quick think about threats to aviation. So we know that aviation is an attractive target. The potential of mass casualties, the immediate and worldwide media attention, financial gain, and global disruption will always be attractive to those people who wish to do us harm, and the threats are many. So the threats, or the continuing threats to our industry, obviously terrorism, it's not going to go away. It's been around for as long as really as aviation, and that is always going to be a threat to us. We're finding more and more as technology increases, and I will mention this a little bit later on, cyber attacks. But what I am going to mention really during this is risk to the industry from individuals who are on the inside. So in response to each attack on our industry, security procedures have been either introduced or they've been fortified, but the intention to cause harm has not gone away. So increasingly, as it becomes more difficult to attack from the outside, from our terrorists and cyber attacks a little bit, we must start to look inwards. So this is what we're going to have a look at today. So the first question really is, what is an insider? So I'll just pop up a definition on screen, and this has changed over the last year or two. So an insider is anyone who has or previously has had authorized access to or knowledge of an organization's resources. And that includes people, processes, information, technology, and facilities, who exploits or intends to exploit their knowledge and position for unauthorized purposes or malicious intent. Now, the insider is not a problem exclusive to aviation, but if you couple this with the potential impact of devastation and destruction and disruption that I mentioned just a moment ago, you can see why we do need to have this on our radar. Think about the scale of information and legitimate access that an insider in our industry might have. They might have knowledge of procedures, including access codes, security protocols, routines, and shift patterns. They could have access to restricted, sensitive, or critical areas. Could have the trust of the public or other company personnel, particularly if they're in a position of authority or they're in uniform. And they may have the ability to move about unquestioned. Now, I do always mention this. Have you ever heard of the high-vis jacket being like an invisibility cloak? So that's just something to be aware of. You know, people in uniform with high-vis look official, and they do have that ability to possibly get where other people may not. So now we've looked at what is an insider, we need to ask you really, who is an insider? What do they look like? And this is the problem that we're going to face, because there is no typical description of an insider. They could be literally anybody. It could be part-time, full-time, Could be permanent or temporary. It could be an employee, there could be a contractor, could be crew, ground staff, engineer, office worker. It could be a cleaner or the head of department. It could even be any one of you. So let's have a think about the motivation of our insider. Now we've established what an insider is and that they could be anybody, we'll need to think about what is going to drive somebody to become that insider threat. So again, there's no single definition of a person's motivation. We could automatically think of terrorism as a key threat to aviation. And whilst that's certainly true, there are many other reasons why a person or a group would want to choose to try to cause harm. So some of the possible motivations that we might think about, it could be for financial gain, and that could be anything from theft of information, from property, from technology. It could be smuggling of people, drugs, and really any sort of contraband. It could be because of somebody's ideology, because they want to highlight their cause, they want to create terror and fear, and they want to have a revenge attack or create retribution. We've also seen the rise of single issue protesters, such as environmental groups. So in the news recently, we've had Just Stop Oil, Extinction Rebellion, just as a couple of examples there. We've also got individuals who hold personal grudges, such as disgruntled or disaffected employees. Increasingly, we're seeing an increase in individuals with mental health issues, which I will touch on again shortly. And also something that you may not have thought about are state actors. So in October of 2023, the head of MI5 warned that cutting edge technology was being stolen, and I will quote this, on an epic scale from the UK, and that more than 20,000 people in the UK had been approached covertly online by Chinese spies to cultivate them to try and access and provide sensitive information. So when you think about Chinese data theft or technology theft, we've got Russian misinformation. Oh, I've just got a message up saying that the presentation is blank. Mike, can you just confirm that I am on screen? Yours is okay, thank you.
Yeah, all okay from my side.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't catch who that was there that just mentioned. Karen. Thanks, Lisa, just confirming you can see it there. I'm just going to pop on a private view. If anybody has clicked forwards at all, oh, you're going to log out. I was going to say either log out or don't click forwards. I'm just going to stop the presentation there, but hopefully, Karen, that will pop back up for you in a moment. Thanks for just confirming that, guys. So in addition to the things that are on the screen, I'd just like to think about the current climate that we are actually living in. And we're not just talking about the environment. So we are still in a period of post-COVID recovery, and Mike mentioned this a little bit earlier on. So the post-COVID social landscape has changed, whether we like it or not. Now, back in 2021, the UK National Crime Agency issued an amber alert to furloughed port and airport workers, warning that they might be at risk of being exploited by organised crime groups as they came back into work. And then after the pandemic, because so many people were laid off during the course of those couple of years, aviation all over the world was rehiring, retraining like mad, really, to meet a ramp up in operations. And the industry brought in thousands of new staff, all of whom had less experience, less security awareness, and less loyalty to the companies because they were brand new in. Now, we saw an increase in temporary security passes during that time, and that highlighted that the issue actually went deeper than just the lack of frontline staff. There were also fewer staff in the back offices available to process the usual vetting procedures. So there was a risk there. We've also got a cost of living crisis where people who are in work are struggling to make ends meet at the moment. And the roles that we rely on to keep our operations safe and who often have the highest levels of security access, such as security screeners, ground handlers, and cleaners, for example, traditionally do attract lower salaries. We're also experiencing national and international political, religious, and ideological extremism, and we're seeing that all over. As Mike showed in his presentation there's conflict in almost every area of the globe. And we are entering into a new world of cyber technology. Now, we're being increasingly influenced by what we see on a device, such as manipulated news on social media. And experts are now fearing the catastrophic impact on democracy through AI technology and viral deepfakes. And now, online disinformation has been around for many years, but with the recent and really rapid advances in AI technology, the use for malicious intent has been taken to a whole new level. Now, back in 2018, the Oxford Internet Institute published a report highlighting the manipulation of public opinion over social media platforms as a critical threat. Yet here we are 6 years later with even less of a grip on it than ever. So that is definitely something that we need to be concerned with within our organisations. So I'm just going to take a look now at the types of insider. So you need to know that the insider can take on several forms. And if you research this online, you'll find them called many things. It's all a variation on a theme of who they actually are. Now, the former Centre for the Protection of National Infrastructure calls them deliberate or deliberate intentional. So this is what we would probably recognise as a malicious insider. It's someone who knows what they're doing, they're choosing to do it, they may obtain employment with the sole intention of abusing their access. We've also got the recruited or the exploited insider. Now, this is someone who's been potentially coerced into that role of insider. They might be vulnerable for all sorts of reasons, all sorts of circumstances, which could lead to them being blackmailed, being threatened, or pressured into acting. We've also got the volunteer or the self-initiated. So these people gained employment without any intent to abuse their access, but at some point during that employment, they decided to do so. Now we've got two further subgroups. The next one is probably the main one, really, the unintentional or unwitting. So this is somebody who's got poor security practices. Things like not protecting their password, not closing their laptops down, leaving doors unsecured, leaving sensitive material, if we still use a photocopier, on the photocopier, who exposes their company inadvertently, allowing a third party, malicious third party to enter simply by not following procedures. So this is really important that we are following our standard operating procedures within our organisation, our industry. And we've also got our ex-employee. So whilst they're not necessarily an insider in a traditional sense that they are currently inside a company, they don't automatically forget all of that information and knowledge when they leave. So it could be somebody who was employed and now they're not, but they still have information, knowledge, and potentially access that could be abused. Now, it's worth highlighting at this point that the percentage of insiders who gained employment with the specific intention of becoming an insider is very small. So according to the CPNI data collection study, which was published in 2009, it was updated in 2012, but it is still being used. This figure was only 6% in comparison to the 76% who saw an opportunity to exploit their position once they were employed. So I did say a few moments ago that the insider could even be you. It could be me. And you probably dismissed it as maybe being too much of a stretch. But what about now? Is it too much of a stretch to think that if somebody offered to pay your mortgage, for example, if you just left a door open, or somebody blackmailed you and you were terrified for your family, but if you just shared a few documents that you've already got access to, it would all go away? Or you were upset with your working conditions and you justified your actions that your company wouldn't care? Or you became so disillusioned with the way that things are in the world and somebody offered you another vision, another ideology, and you came to believe passionately in that different vision? it's not too much of a leap to think that, you know, we could all become that person. I'll leave that one with you. So should we be concerned? Well, clearly the answer is yes. We definitely need to be considering the insider as a credible threat. And this is why, because an insider, and there we've got our description again of somebody who has or previously had authorized access or knowledge, could create an insider risk. So this is the likelihood of harm or loss to an organization and its impact because of the action or inaction, as in the unintentional insider. They then could become an insider threat. So this is where they've now got an intention to or is likely to cause harm to an organization and cause an insider event, which is where they actually have an act resulting in harm or loss to the organization. Now, it could be catastrophic. It could lead to loss of life or destruction of infrastructure, but it could also cause massive disruption, which could have a financial impact. It could cause reputational harm from which an organization might just not recover at all. So I'm now going to talk you through some examples of insider activities. You might be wondering, well, okay, well, this is all fine, but you know, what are we actually talking? What are these acts that our insiders are doing? So I'm just going to show you a few examples. Some you may be familiar with, and I've tried to get a few more recent examples for you today. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is Dallo Airlines. So this was back in 2016, where an explosive device was disguised in a laptop and it exploded on flight 159. Now, there had been a change of aircraft and an hour's delay with the departure of the aircraft taking off. The bomb actually detonated before the aircraft reached its final cruising altitude. So it wasn't fully pressurized, meaning that the effects of the explosion were limited. And you can see the hole that the explosion made in the side of the fuselage there. Now, the person who was holding the laptop was ejected from the aircraft, and their body was found on the ground near Mogadishu sometime later. Now, at least 20 people were, including government officials, were arrested on suspicion of being linked to this attack. 2 airline employees were subsequently found guilty of planning the plot and of being members of the terrorist organisation Al-Shabaab, and they were sentenced to life in prison. And one of those 2 was a former security official at the airport. Now, 8 other airport workers were convicted of aiding the plot and were also given prison sentences, and they had various roles around the airport, including security screeners, a police officer, a porter, and immigration officers. The next example is of sabotage. So we've moved forward a little bit to 2019 and over to American Airlines. So this is an example highlighting the impact of financial hardship on aviation employees. So this is an American Airlines mechanic at Miami International Airport who basically glued a piece of foam inside the aircraft's air data module systems, which reports aircraft speed and pitch and other critical data. Now, he told investigators he was already working double and triple shifts to try and provide for his family. He was struggling because of stalled contract negotiations between the company and the unions. He claimed that he didn't intend to do any harm. What his intention was that he would cause damage, which would delay the aircraft to be fixed, work which he would then be called out for on overtime and get money. So he wasn't trying to cause harm as such, but he did sabotage it to try and get overtime work for himself. Now, he was found guilty of willfully attempting to damage, destroy, disable and wreck an aircraft, and he was fired as well. So that didn't work out quite so well for him. Now, just in March of 2023, we're moving through into drug smuggling now. So March 2023, a Vietnamese custom branch inspected the luggage of 4 Vietnam Airlines flight attendants who were coming back into Vietnam from Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport. And they discovered that they'd got, amongst other toiletry items, 327 tubes of toothpaste. Now, the flight attendants confessed that they'd been asked by an unidentified person in Paris to transport the goods for over 10 million dong. So I thought, well, that sounds like a lot of money. I did look that up. It's about $400. Now, fair play to them. They did their due diligence and they checked out a few tubes and they found nothing unusual. So they agreed to transport them. It did turn out that they contained more than 11 kilos of ecstasy, ketamine, and cocaine. Now, the flight attendants were found to have been exploited to transport the drugs unknowingly, and they were released, but the investigation continued. And 15 months later, the investigation finally ended with the police pressing charges against about 960 individuals who were allegedly involved. So it was a huge investigation. And during that, they seized hundreds of kilos of various drugs, ammunition, guns, and 3 grenades. So that was quite a big bust that they managed there. And sticking with drug smuggling, so this is in Guyana now of February of this year. So a handling services shift leader and a ground security coordinator were arrested by the Customs Anti-Narcotics Unit as they were attempting to smuggle cocaine onto a British Airways flight that was bound for St. Lucia, but with an onwards connection onto the UK, which I understand was the end destination. So whilst they were overseeing the aircraft for departure, they were observed retrieving 2 suitcases from over the perimeter fence, and it aroused suspicion. So a search of the aircraft was carried out, where they found 4 further duffel bags, which you can see on the screen there. And these bags and suitcases had no BA check-in tags, no luggage tags or anything on them. And on further inspection, you can see laid out on the ground there a total of 64 cocaine bricks weighing 71 kilos. And the street value in the UK was estimated to be over £3 million. So quite a big haul there. A little bit closer to home now, we've got Gatwick of this year, and this was an information breach. So this young lady worked on the anti-smuggling team at Border Force Gatwick, and she was arrested after sending images of sensitive documents containing details of criminal records, videos of drugs that were being seized at Gatwick, and sharing details of a police investigation that she was involved with to somebody who was in prison. Now, she was also found guilty of moving money through her bank account on behalf of individuals who were involved in drug trafficking. So that's information being lost there. Now, we've mentioned about drug smuggling, and we've also got people smuggling and human trafficking. So in 2017 at Dublin Airport, 2 members of Aer Lingus ground staff were arrested by police in connection to an international people smuggling ring. They took place after allegations were raised that staff were allowing illegal immigrants to sneak out of the airport without going through passport control. They were put onto catering trucks and driven out of the airport, thus avoiding being checked. The human trafficking operation is understood to have had international links, including with the Italian mafia and the Chinese triads, and it was believed to have been worth over 18 million euros. So that was quite a substantial trafficking ring that was discovered there. Now, I am just going to mention the next slide that I am going to show I am going to talk about an incident of suicide by pilot. So just to give you a warning of that one. So this is Horizon in 2018. So this gentleman is 28-year-old Richard Russell. He was a Horizon Air Ground Service agent with no piloting experience. He performed an unauthorized takeoff of a Dash 8. 2 local F-15 fighters were scrambled to intercept the aircraft, and local ATC made radio contact with him. And during the course of that conversation, which you can find online, he described himself as a broken guy, got a few screws loose, I guess. It's quite heartbreaking, really. He flew around for 1 hour and 15 minutes, and then he did crash the aircraft into an island in the Puget Sound. And he did an incredible barrel roll, of which he came out of it. I don't think he was expecting to actually have pulled the aircraft out of that, and did say to the air traffic controllers, he apologised to his friends and family, and said he wasn't really planning on landing. Now, more recently, in October of last year, 2023, Horizon Air were in the news again with an off-duty pilot, Joseph Emerson. I don't know if you remember this one in the news, where he tried to cut, he was riding on the jump seat in the cockpit and tried to cut the fuel to the engines of the aircraft. He was subdued and restrained by the onboard crew, and the aircraft did land safely on that one. Now, since the 90s, there have been several events with great loss of life due to this. So that's quite a range of activity there, from drug smuggling, information breaches, criminal activity. And what can we do about it? So this is really kind of the main thing that you need to be sort of taking away from this. The core elements of reducing insider risk can be summed up by 3 words: deny, detect, and deter. Now, we do this through embedding a robust insider risk mitigation framework in our organisations. And the graphic that you can see on the screen is from the National Protective Security Authority, and I've put the website address on there. This is their recommendation for developing an insider threat programme which aims to reduce insider risk. Now, the NPSA have got a huge amount of resource on their website should you wish to take a little deeper look into this. Now, we can aim to deny entry to a future insider by our vetting and recruitment practices, but robust recruitment and vetting will only take us so far because, as we've already established, most of the people who are going to be an insider risk and threat are already in our workforce and become an insider threat at a later date. So we can try then to detect those individuals who might be acting against us by providing training for our staff and by educating them on the risks, the threats and opportunities for insider activity, showing them what to look for, having honest and open conversations and two-way communications with our managers and our employees, and having a process in place for appropriate response where threats are discovered. And we can try to deter the potential insider by creating and championing a positive security culture in our organisations where all of our staff are encouraged and empowered to take responsibility for security and to nurture an attitude of continuous improvement. So I've mentioned the CPNI data collection study from 2009. I'm just going to show you a few of their findings because all of this sounds great, but what actually are we looking for? So the CPNI data collection study found that significantly more males engaged in insider activity than females. The instances of activity peaked between the ages of 31 and 45, and then it started to decrease. Most of the activity was carried out by permanent staff, and the majority of that was self-initiated. So they saw an opportunity to exploit access once they were already employed. The top motivation was financial gain, 47%, with ideology at 20%, and then the desire for recognition and loyalty, both of those were coming in at 14%. And if you think it is just the workforce, well, acts were evenly split between the managers and the non-managers, so it was across the board. So that's who is carrying out our acts. So what sort of behaviours do we need to be aware of? What do we need to be looking out for? So we can watch out for changes in our colleagues' work-related attitudes and behaviours. And it's such things like changes in financial circumstances, either way, either becoming financially unstable or actually taking lots of holidays and coming into a lot of money unusually. We could look out for signs of addiction, such as gambling, drugs, or alcohol. People who are becoming increasingly withdrawn or exhibiting significantly anxious behaviour, or they're stressed about their work or their home life. Changing their political or their ideological views and becoming aggressive or excessively opinionated about those views. It could be that they've got unusual workplace behaviours, so they're around work all the time or odd hours without clear reason to be there, and possibly seeking out sensitive information that's not normally required in the scope of their job, or sharing information with a third party that they're not authorised to do so. Now, I will just say, just because somebody might be displaying these some or all of these behaviours or characteristics, it does not automatically mean that they are becoming an insider or pose an insider risk or threat. It could be an indicator of a welfare concern. It could be a safeguarding issue. It could be a family breakdown, mental health. All of these things need support. So what you need to do in your organisation and with your colleagues, with your workforce, is to notice these things. So notice it, ask the questions, and report any concerns using your correct internal reporting procedure at your organisation. What you mustn't do is just ignore it, because what if? Now, I'd like to just finish up with a final slide for you about positive security culture. And this is something that I am quite passionate about, and it does really encapsulate everything that we have been talking about and everything that we should be doing with security in our organizations. So security culture refers to the set of values that are shared by everybody in the organization that determine how people are expected to think and act and approach security. So a good, positive, effective security culture is one in which all the employees understand and accept that they are responsible for security, because that's going to strengthen our resilience to security threats, and it's going to reduce our vulnerability to attack. A positive security culture should be the norm. It shouldn't be something that we do as well or that we have to think about. It should be something that's so normal that we do it and we don't think about doing it any other way. Another key part of the process is ongoing education and communication through our organisation. So it's imperative that staff at all levels are advised of what they need to do, but more importantly, why they're doing it. And they need to understand that they individually play a huge part in reducing the risks from practicing good security themselves, so that they're not that unintentional, unwitting insider, and allowing third-party malicious access, to knowing how and when to report suspicious behaviour. And one of the arms, in fact, it's the one that is actually horizontal that you can probably read there, is continuous improvement. And that's something that should be part of every organisation's security management system. None of us should be content to just reach a certain level and think, right, that's it, I've done it, I'm there now. We should always be looking for ways to improve, to be proactive, and to be resilient. And above all else, we need all of our staff and all of our workforce to understand and accept that security is everybody's responsibility. And hopefully you've found a little bit of that interesting. There might be some themes there that you want to take away and do some further research on. But in the meantime, I'd just like to say thank you very much for your time and your attention. And if there are any questions, then please pop them into the chat there. And hopefully Mike's in the background there, and I'll hand over back to Mike.
Thank you, Cheryl. Just to say a big thank you for everyone for joining us this evening. If you do have any questions, you can pop them in the chat, or you can drop Cheryl or I an email. Again, if you want to know any more information about SkyPeople Training, just take a look at our website, skypeopletraining.co.uk, and keep an eye out on all of our social media for our next webinars. Thank you very much for joining us, and wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.
Thank you.